Hello, and welcome back to the Farmstead Forum podcast, your southern hub for all things homesteading. I'm your host, Emily Faulkner, and today we're diving into the top 5 wild foods or herbs you can grow and propagate right at home. This episode is presented by Suzanne Shires, a master herbalist. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for the video slides from today's PowerPoint presentation. Let's get started on your journey to a more self-sufficient homestead. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Farmstead Forum podcast. I'm your host, Emily Faulkner, and today we are joined again by Suzanne Shires, a master herbalist. She will be discussing the top 5 wild foods to grow and propagate on your homestead. If you want more info on Suzanne's bio, please follow the show notes for today's recording. Suzanne, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. Glad to be here.
So, Suzanne has a nice presentation prepared, so I'm going to let her introduce the first of the 5 wild foods she's going to talk about.
All right, thanks. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on all your foods, and several of these have not only nutritious, they're delicious, nutritious, but they have medicinal qualities as well. And I'll kind of point a few things out to you so that you can see them. Anytime you're going to forage wild food, make sure you positively identify. It's crucial that you positively identify. And I will kind of cast a little shade on plant apps. If you're using a plant app, you must check it against a plant ID, either a book or pull up just a plain Google, not a Google identification app, plain Google, and look up your plant to make sure you're getting the right plant. And just a little bit of botany is going to go a long way. And when I say that, there's little things to know, like the leaf margin. If this is your leaf, what does the edge of the leaf look like? Is it jagged, serrated, or is it smooth, or is it wavy? Little things like that can really mess you up can kind of trip you up when you're trying to identify, because you may have the same shaped leaf as this plant here, but this plant has a jagged margin and this plant has a smoother margin. Well, that's a critical identifying factor. Another factor would be the way the branches or the stems branch off of each other. Is it one single stem instead of branching stems? Things like that. So you have to know a good ID book. I recommend everybody get a good ID book. Samuel Thayer has one for every region. Newcomb's Flower Guides is another one, and it's not just flowers; it's other plants as well. Tree guides, things like that. You can get 100 books, but I would recommend one from Samuel Thayer or Newcomb's, and there are some others that are very, very good. As far as the botany goes, a book that I would recommend is Botany in a Day by Thomas Elpel. It's got a very simple plan to study botany. For example, everybody knows what a mint looks like, right? It's got a triangular shaped leaf. It's a pointed tip. It has some sort of fragrance, and the flowers will always be purple, lavender to purple. And that's in the Lamiaceae family, but that also includes lemon balm and catnip and oregano and things like that. Those are all in the Lamiaceae family, and they all have those same identifying characteristics. They'll just be a little bit different. So when I say a triangle-shaped leaf, like a lemon balm has a longer triangle, CNL has a longer triangle, but catnip has a shorter triangle, or peppermint has a shorter triangle. So you begin to learn those things. But if you narrow that plant down from those 5 characteristics: triangular shaped leaf, opposite and alternate, that's north-south off the stem, east-west, north-south, east-west, all the way up the stem. So opposite and alternate, some sort of fragrance, and a purple flower. You probably narrowed 10,000 plants down to less than 1,000. So it's actually a fun party trick too, to be able to identify plants without having to look at a plant app. Plants are good. They're definitely not accurate. And if you don't know what the plant looks like, how would you know? So anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about plant apps, but I want everybody to be sure to positively identify your plants. These 5 that I'm going to talk about are these 5 categories are plants that you can propagate on your homestead. And I encourage you to do that because number one, they're not invasive. They are prolific, but they're easy to control. You're not going to have them just go wild on your homestead and decimate your native plants. Some of these are native, some of them are not. If you're a strictly native plant person, just be prepared to. Might not want this one on your property. Look for a place where it grows and be able to get to it because these are nutritious, they're delicious, but because we have seem to have some issues with domestic food, anytime you can get a more nutritious food and a readily available food, and one that grows easily without babying it or extra water or extra fertilizer, things like that. If it's going to grow on its own, I'm all for it. That's a little bit less work I have to do. All right,
So would you say that these 5 foods we're going to introduce they're not all of them are native, but they are perennial and they don't require a lot of TLC when you're growing them? Would you say that?
Yes, most of these are perennial, and that's the beauty of a wild food. They're going to either, if they're not perennial in your area, they're going to seed readily, so that you don't necessarily have to do something to them every year to get them to come back. Most of them are perennial, but in certain areas, if you're in one of the lower growing zones, like say 4 or 5, even 6 for some things, won't grow as a perennial, but you can certainly plant it to be an annual, leave the seeds, and they'll come back. Several of these are biennial, meaning it's a 2-year plant. So if you've got, and I'll show you those too, if it's a biennial, the first year it's usually a rosette. The second year it makes the stem. Mullein comes to mind for most people as a biennial plant. If it's just a rosette on the ground, that's your first year. If it's got a stem, that's the second year. And things like roots in the second year, you won't want the root because it gets hard by that time, hard and stiff and fibrous, and it's not edible. It's not it's not palatable, which that word is meristematic. That just means tasty bits. So if your roots are hard and tough, you can certainly stew them to make a broth when they're older, but it's still not going to taste as good. They'll be a little bit more bitter. And then too, on a stem, a 2-year plant, a biennial plant, the leaves on the stem tend to be a little bit more stiff or not as tasty, maybe a little bit more bitter because the plant has bolted. I'm sure everybody who grows broccoli or mustard greens, anything like that, if we talked about our plants bulging, that just means it has made the flowers or created the stem. So it's cast prime for leaf at that point, but there might be other parts of the plant that's edible, the flowers or the berries or something like that. So it would still be meristematic. It just may be a different part than what you're thinking of. All right, number 5 on my list of top 5 is Jerusalem artichoke. This has a funny nickname, put an F in front of artichoke. So I heard that the other day. Sorry, I'm never going to get that out of my head. So put an F in front of artichoke and you'll understand. This plant has, this is in the sunflower family. The root is the part that most people think about, but this entire plant is edible. See the little sunflowers there? Those are completely edible. The leaves are completely edible, but this one will come back year after year. I had some in a bed right outside my kitchen window, that were there probably for about 5 years before I dug them up, and those roots were gnarly, like you see in the picture, but they were about this big, at least a pound per root. So you scrub those and clean them. You can peel them if you want to. Boiling them usually takes away a little bit of the gas effect. But there's a lot of inulin in this plant. So when you're eating these roots, inulin, if you're when you're thinking about health factors, people that are diabetic tend to need more inulin, and it does help with diabetes. It doesn't lower your blood sugar. It helps your body to process that and to help your body cope with that condition. So Jerusalem artichoke is certainly one to add that you would eat daily, and it would have a medicinal effect too, as well as to be edible. The flowers, again, as I say, even the stems, before they get tough at the very tips when the plant just buds, you can certainly use the stems and the leaves, and of course the tubers.
So I really thought that the Jerusalem artichoke was like the artichoke you get at the store, but it never forms those type of bulbs.
It does
Does
not.
it?
The name is a little bit misleading, right?
Misleading, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit misleading because it's not in the artichoke family. It's in the sunflower family, and I'm not quite sure. I'm sure I've read that somewhere, why it's called Jerusalem artichoke, but it's escaped me for the moment. But you may be thinking of globe artichoke, or
That's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
there's another plant that starts with a C. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, I'll think of that in a minute. I'll pop it out at a real odd time.
So because this is a root that you're harvesting, so when would you harvest it if you have to do it in the first year?
You can, when you're going to harvest these, you want to harvest them in the fall, in the winter time, and you can actually leave them in the ground unless you have very cold winters. You can leave these in the ground, pile over the leaves, pile over the insulation on top of them, and you wouldn't have to harvest the entire plant or the entire crop at one time. You can go harvest a meal or a few days worth as you need them. They're great in soups. You can stew them just like they are. You can slice them up, put them in a salad as they are. I have found that fermenting them for about 2 days, 2 to 3 days before you cook them, and that's just scrub them, pile them in a jar, and pour a salt brine over them of about the 2% salt brine. So that would be 2 tablespoons of salt, non-iodized salt, so Himalayan salt, something like that, into a quart of water, and then fill your jar and let those sit for about 2 days. And then just when you drain that water off, you could actually use that water as a weed killer, a border. Don't just toss it down the sink. If you're like me, I'm a little bit frugal, so I'll use that anytime I have salt water. I'll just go pour it where I need like on my driveway or somewhere where I need to kill some weeds. I have very few weeds. So
that makes me sad that I wasted all that salt brine from my what do you call it, sauerkraut that I made.
Sauerkraut. Well, now if you're going to make a sauerkraut with these, well, not necessarily these, because it has the inulin, is why I don't save the brine on these. But if I make a sauerkraut, or like I love ginger carrots, which is fermented for about 2 weeks. If I have brine left over, I put that in a soup because it's got your seasoning already in it. You can use it as a marinade if you like to salt brine meat, especially a wild meat. A salt brine as opposed to a vinegar brine will actually take the wild taste out better. So if you have a little bit of a gamey meat, if it didn't drop, for some reason, if the animal didn't drop, if it ran and it caused an adrenaline rush, you may have a more gamey meat. And that salt brine is wonderful, especially if you've used garlic or something like that in your brine. It's wonderful for a meal. And it's also, you can use that as a base for barbecue sauces, or like I say, soup and stews, things like that. So don't waste that leftover juice. My mother would drink it. She would just drink it like it was. So healthy, and so many probiotics in there. So
Kind of looks like a water chestnut.
it does, and it has that same texture of a water chestnut. It's a little bit more lumpy, bumpy, but you could certainly scrub it. The peel is so thin that if you scrubbed it with a brush, with a stiffer brush, you're going to peel off that peel, which helps a little bit as far as the gaseous effect. But then after you ferment those, I still go ahead and simmer them or boil them or parboil them, and then use it how I want to. You can mash them. They make a great filler for like potato pancakes, things like that. They're quite delicious. And there are several tubers that would work in this, and you can actually use that poultice once you peel that. You can use this as a burn on a second or third degree burns. They need special treatment because those are usually open wounds as well. But you could put this full whole uncooked on a burn or a scrape or a scab of some sort of rash or wound, and it's going to help draw out any type of tuber that has inulin in it, like a potato. My dad was a welder, and he burned his eyes, and my mother would have to get potato pulp to draw out those toxins and or draw out that burn. And then if you're using it for a boil, like an acne cyst that's just really showing out, that's just, if you have teenagers that just have those really raw red looking acne, you can use this as a pulp and just put it on it, especially on back areas or other areas like that, but on your face as well, and it'll draw that out. So this is a good one for that, for medicinal, not only edible, but a medicinal product as well. All right, number 4, evening primrose, Oenothera biennis. This is not the little pink, low-growing evening primrose. This is Sundrop's evening primrose. This one, I have had them to grow as tall as 6-8 feet. They grow very tall for a flower. But you'll see there, if you look to the right, the little buds. Those little buds are edible. They turn into, they'll open up into the flower. I like to just pull those little buds and just sprinkle them on a salad. The flowers can be sprinkled on a salad as well. This entire plant is edible, different parts of throughout the year. The picture on the left, that's what it looks like in its first year. This is a biennial. By the way, the Jerusalem artichoke is a perennial. It will come back as long as there's roots, and even a little bitty root on a Jerusalem artichoke will produce. So just be aware of that. I've been trying to get some that escaped. I've been trying to get them out of a bed for about 3 years. They'll come up, and I just have to pull them up. It's real easy to get rid of them. It's not like it's invasive, but I'll just pull them up before they take root. But little bits, the seeds are very prolific, things like that. So just be aware that you will have to take care of the. Let me go back to that picture. You will have to take care to not spread it, but it is certainly quite manageable. It's not going to cause you invasive problems.
And is it best to propagate that from a tuber?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, what about the primrose? If you're trying to grow that, do you need to just save the seeds
on the primrose
from it, like you're starting it?
Yeah, you can start it very easily, and there's thousands of seeds in an evening primrose. It's amazing. So tuber here on the Jerusalem artichoke, and then on the evening primrose, you can just see how many seeds are coming off. All those seeds probably came out
hundreds of them.
One of those little trumpets, and you see.
So,
go ahead.
Can you get the flower head during the summertime, or when would you want to propagate some of the seeds to to when it dries out and then the pods open up? When would you want to cut those?
It's in that flower stage now. It's probably on its last stages of flower. And then you'll see that those little trumpets there in the center, they get kind of woody, and they'll just split open and pop open, and it'll disperse some of the seed, but it won't disperse it all. So they're very easily propagated, and it'll get nice roots. Those roots are edible in wintertime. You can lift up roots and separate roots and propagate it that way. Just be aware that you want to get it when it's in that rosette stage. So if you see a tall one, look around. You'll find more rosettes, but you can that where it's red like that. That's been hit by frost, so it's bright green, and then when it gets hit by frost, it doesn't kill it out. Or make the leaves go away. They just turn red. They'll be a little bit stiffer once they're red like that, but you can certainly chop them up and throw them in a stew or in a soup at that point. If you're getting them before they turn red, they're much more meristematic. So you can put those in a salad. If you're like me, I don't eat too many salads as the weather gets cold. I eat more by the seasons. So that's when we're going to need, for the fall and winter, is when we're going to need more roots and things like that. So this plant would certainly help supply those carbohydrates that roots have. And the greens as well are very nutritious. You can put those in a bone broth in the wintertime, and then just either like a chicken bone broth or even beef with just the greens in it and your seasonings and things. You can the seeds, they'll be ready to harvest probably by end of August up into September. In certain places, you'll get them as early as late August. But I start looking for them here in Zone 7. I'll start looking for them about October. They'll split open. As I said, as you can see there, they're kind of like the trumpet. But when you get those, I'll just take a pillar case, and that whole long head, I'll just bend it over and break it off into the pillowcase, or cut it off with snippers, and then just stuff it down in the pillowcase, and all those seeds start falling down into the pillowcase. But when you take and mash those little trumpets, they're woody. Remember, when you mash them, seeds just come out all over the place. I gathered a quart of seed from what I could stuff into a pillowcase, and I didn't stuff it tight. So they're just very prolific seeds. These can be ground. It's highly medicinal for women as far as women's health goes. Hot flashes, menopause, monthly symptoms as well. That's not to say that men can't eat them, because they're very nutritious. Men can eat them just fine, and they don't have a problem with them, but they're specific for women.
Can I ask you something on that, Suzanne?
Sure.
You might be about to explain this, but so I've heard of the evening primrose oil.
Yes.
For women when they're trying to enhance their cervical ripening before delivery, so they can start going to labor. So
Yes.
what part of the plant would you use, and how would you make the oil possibly to do that?
That's the seed. Now, you do have to have an oil extractor if you're going to make a strong oil like you would purchase. However, I have found that you can take a bottle of oil, like olive oil, whatever, fill it about half full with seeds, and then just leave your oil in there, let it sit for a month or so, and then you can just start using that. And then you can use the oil and the seeds in your cooking. The seeds have a nice nutty flavor. I'll put these seeds in a sprinkle as well. So if you're eating these seeds, it's not just the oil. That's just the commercial.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're eating the seeds themselves, if you're going to apply it like to the cervical area, or if you're just going to start eating it profusely the last week or two of your pregnancy, you can certainly use a good quality oil and eat that oil with every meal to help enhance that cervical that delivery. But other women, women that are not pregnant have a tremendous benefit from that oil. And you can use it. I'll put these in a shower oil as well. So it's not only medicinal, or it's not only, medicinal internally, but I'll put it with other herbs in my shower oil, and it just leaves your skin feeling so soft. I like jojoba oil, um, sweet almond oil, black seed oil, black cumin oil, all of these oils that are really high lipid content are very good for the skin, and they're very good to take internally as well. Olive oil is just the beginning. There's probably 200 seed oils, and people say don't eat the seed oils, but seed oils are very good for your skin. Like raspberry seed oil, I wouldn't necessarily take it internally, but it's very good, very healing for your skin. So there are certain seed oils that I use in a shower oil, and I put evening primrose in those oils. All right, let's see. Number 3, nuts of all kinds. If you have room on your homestead, I would certainly add black walnut is highly medicinal, as everybody is beginning to learn, for not necessarily to eat, but for parasitic cleansing. And the white walnut, which is a butternut, is the one. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but this is the white walnut, and this one is the black walnut. So the white butternut is second to the black walnut for the parasitic. But when I find the white walnuts, I get those as well, because just in case there's different constituents in them, which there obviously are, it's a different plant. I like to blend the two together. Jugulone is what is in the black walnut, but there is some jugulone in the white walnut as well. Of course, this is acorns. When you go to select an oak tree, if you have room on your homestead for an oak tree, find out which one is going to produce the largest nuts, to make it less work, because acorns are a lot of work. There's a high oil content, and they are very tannic. Tannic means astringency, which makes your mouth pucker. So you have to leach the acorns, shell them, leach them in water, and that can take multiple days. So you're just leaching out those tannins. I have a friend who puts hers in a big nut bag, and she just leaves it at her sink. And every time she turns on the tap, she just rinses that nut meat daily, multiple times a day. And that's really what you want to do for at least a few days. Some people will do it by boiling those nuts. I just prefer to do it a natural way, and then I'll grind it up into like a not a meal, a little bit more thicker than, say, what you would grind up a cornmeal. I want my pieces a little bit larger because they stay fresher. The larger they are, the fresher they are. But you do want to go ahead and get them started on the grind. And then that can be made into flour. That could be added to oatmeal. That could be added to different foods. It can be a meat substitute. I have a friend, Holly Drake, who will take acorn meat and burdock root and make burgers, meatballs, and things like that. So you grind that up and use it as the binder for that ground burdock root, and they're delicious. You can add your seasonings to it. You can also, if you're going to do a flour or a bread that you want it to rise, like a cake or something like that, you would only want to use about a third of nut meat or other things that don't have gluten in it. But if you're going to make a flatbread, acorn flatbread is absolutely fabulous. I would also put it with, say, yellow dock seed, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. That's on a different one. But I would put it with different seeds, both the evening primrose and some of the other things that we'll talk about. You could add those excuse me, as a flour additive. And then this one, of course, is the hickory. Hickory nuts are the hardest nut to crack, but they're highly nutritious, and it's an oily nut. That means you're going to be getting a lot of nutrition, a lot of brain health in all of these nuts. They have the high oil content. That also means if you don't process them completely, they'll go rancid. So nuts are hard to store for more than a year, and sometimes if you're in a hot location, it may be hard to store them through the summer. So that's another indicator that eating by the seasons means we eat our nuts and roots and things like that in the wintertime. Leafy greens and things like that that are lighter and less filling, we eat those in warm weather. So that's an indicator of eating by the seasons. And if you do that, if you do eat by the seasons, you may have winter squash like acorn squash or butternut squash, things like that. Acorns and black walnuts make wonderful toasted toppings for those heavy starchy foods that's going to keep the body warm. So when you're eating by the seasons in the wintertime, think of what's going to warm your body: the soups, the stews, things like that, breads, things like that are going to add that warmth to your body and give you nutrition and give you energy as well. A lot of people who are survivalists or preppers, they only think about calories. We've really done ourselves a disservice by doing that, by not thinking about the nutrition that we need to be putting in our bodies to keep going. You can go a long time on no calories but high nutrition. Yes, you'll probably lose weight, but if you're getting very few calories, they're saying, oh, you have to have 3,000 calories, 2,000 calories to survive in a high stress situation. We have a lot of stress now, or we get that many calories now, and you see most of the United States is not thin and healthy. We're having some issues with our diet while we're eating those heavy, starchy foods all year long. How many times a week do you eat French fries? Grabbing a burger, or even if you're having a steak or chicken, you've got a French fry or a potato on the side. And our food pyramid is upside down. There's a lot of nutritionists talking about that now. We don't need the 5 grains in the summertime, but we might need 5 servings of grains or heavy carbohydrate foods in the wintertime. Now, if you're sitting at a desk all in the heat, with your heater running, you're not going to need as much as if you're out chopping wood, hiking a lot, things like that. So you do, even though I say have your carbohydrates in the wintertime, you do have to, have common sense with it. If you need that in moderation, then by all means, you don't necessarily want these things at every single meal. But when you're adding the raw things to your diet, wild things to your diet, and you're getting them on your homestead, it really does add nutrition to your diet.
Let me ask you a couple questions before you move on. In the order that you talked about, in the black walnut, is it the hull that you use around the nut? That's the anti-parasitic part of it?
It's the green hull where you see there.
The green hull.
Even if it's starting to turn black, but if it's a black hull on the outside, you do not want it. It's already lost its potential. You want to get it when it's like this on the tree. You can pull them off the tree. Sometimes they'll start falling at this point, but you take that husk off with a knife down to the nut. Then you can do other things with that nut, that unripe nut. At that point, there's several things you can do with the nut itself, but that's where you'll take this outer husk, put it in a high proof alcohol. You don't want to make a tea with this. This is a high proof alcohol. You don't want to make a glycerin or glyceride with it either. You do need the alcohol, and we're talking a drop dosage. So I know some people who won't have any alcohol at all. That's understandable. There are other parasitics that they can use. But if you're going to use this one, you're talking 3 drops at a time. You can, in a protocol, you may want to use it on an extended protocol with other herbs, but you are talking drop dosage. You want a high proof alcohol. You don't add any water to it, and you want to make it potent. So fill your jar full of the hull pieces, if you possibly can, or 2/3 full, and then fill it all the way with 190 proof alcohol. That's PGA, Everclear. Everclear is a name brand. I use a different brand, so I wound up calling it PGA, but that means pure grain alcohol.
Okay, and go ahead. Sorry.
There are some constituents in the white walnut here, the butternut. There are some constituents in that. So if you found that one, I would put a few, maybe 1 to 4, like every 4 black walnuts, put 1 white walnut, just to get a full spectrum.
You probably get better pollination that way too.
Yeah,
and then when I was going through the Master Gardener program, I remember them talking about the difference. There was 2 different types of oak trees, and one made the bigger acorn than the other. Would be more worth your time to do it for, like you were saying, making a flower or something.
Right.
Which oak tree is it? Do you know which one is the one that makes the bigger?
Red oaks tend to make the smaller ones, but I'm think a burr oak is one that's got this big fuzzy cap on it. That nut will be this big, and I can't remember if that's a white or a red. But
I think it is the white oak. There's the white oak tree, right? That makes the bigger ones.
The white oak trees tend to make the bigger ones. That's not saying there's 100 different oaks. So the 2 categories are white and red. And the way you tell them apart, if you look at the leaf, there are ways to tell the bark, but the easiest way is to look at the leaf. And if the leaf has a very sharp point, that's a red oak. If it's more rounded on the tip, that's a variety of white oak. White oak is going to also be more astringent. Now, oddly enough, the nuts tend to be sweeter than the small ones. But if you're looking for an astringent that's going to assist an antibiotic herb, the astringent that of choice is typically white oak. And southern white oak has some antiseptic properties in it as well. So when you think about that, if you've got an infected wound, it got a cut on your arm, you want to draw that close. And when I'm talking about a deep wound, you don't want to draw close a deep wound until it heals from the bottom. But if you've got a scrape or a scratch where the skin is just jagged and rough, like an abrasion, if you put your antiseptic on there, maybe yellow root or a berberine or other usnea, whatever you're going to put on it, white oak bark, a tincture or a compress, make a very strong tea of white oak bark from, say, a branch. Cut off a branch, take the bark off, boil that for 20 minutes, cool it enough, and put your cloth in it and put on your skin. And hold that on it is going to help tighten that tissue and draw that back together. So that's your corollary herb for your main herb, which is when your main herb is an antiseptic, your corollary herb, the assistant, is going to be your astringent. And white oak is my favorite. There are other astringents like blackberry root. Very good for diarrhea. It's going to tighten those tissues when they're lax and you're flushing out. Your body is flushing itself, but it's time to stop that. Blackberry root is a very good astringent for the digestive system. Not so much the skin, although it would help, but white oak bark for the external, blackberry root tea for the internal.
All right, I have one more question about the hickory nuts, because we have a hickory tree in our pasture, but you pretty much obliterate anything inside by trying to crack open. Do you have a method that you would recommend or that you've tried that doesn't and
If you
then
crack it,
pieces.
yeah, if you have a stone that's flat, like even concrete, but just beware that you'll eventually wear out your concrete. They're that hard. But if you turn it to the side and crack it right on that rib that brings the two pieces together, you can see right here where see that rib right there. If you crack it right on that, they do tend to come apart easier. But
Okay, that's a
it
good
takes
tip.
practice. Yeah. And then a pig nut especially has that little pig snout on the end, so you can do it that way too. Hold it straight up and go down on that, like right on that part right there.
That's a tool you're talking about, a pig nut?
Pig nut is a variety of hickory.
Oh, okay.
Shagbark is another variety of hickory. Shagbark nuts tend to be small, but a pig nut will have a larger hickory. So it just depends on the variety that you're looking at or that you happen to have.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for
All of these nuts too, by the way, they're halves. They're they're inside like this. What else has two halves like that? The brain has two halves like that. So nuts, because of the oils, boy, it's raining really hard. I don't know if y'all can hear that.
just
But
a little. It's okay.
yeah, that oil is very good for brain health. So not only are you doing, like with black walnut especially, not only is it a parasitic, but you're really adding to your brain health. I would put those with rosemary, lion's mane, things like that are going to help the brain function. All right, so the next one is fruit. There's a ton of fruit that grows wild. If you don't have brambles, cane fruit trees, if you're growing fruit trees, domesticated fruit trees especially, it's going to be 3 to 5 years before you get fruit. You can have fruit from your cane fruit, your cane plants, by next spring or next summer. So if you're getting blackberries, this is a blackberry over here to the right. And that includes dewberries, and several other berries that have a thorn on the stem, on the cane. So any variety of the wild ones, I tend to prefer over a domesticated one. I feel like the taste is better than, say, the thornless. But even if you have the thornless, get them. You want to get your fruit started because that's where your vitamin C, you have vitamin D, you have so many constituents in fruit. All of these plants are high nutrition. So that's why I suggest getting them on your homestead. But blackberries have their own set because it's a dark berry. You've got the anthocyanins that help fight cancers. All of the different constituents in those dark fruits that do help fight cancer. The leaves can be used for teas as a nutrition. You've got vitamin C in the leaves just as much, not quite as much as the fruit, but it's certainly a potent source of vitamin C to use those leaves. And then, of course, as I said earlier, the root after a couple years, because cane fruits are a biennial. The second year they will die out, but you can get those roots after the fruit's gone. Then you can dig up those roots and use those while they still are viable. Others you can use first year fruits as well. So you've got multiple uses for that blackberry. This one is another cane fruit. This is called wineberry, and it is said to be an invasive from Japan or Asian countries. I have 2 rows of it. It's my absolute favorite berry. It is so sweet. It's soft. It's got a soft flavor, if that makes sense. Like a strawberry is tart and tangy on your tongue. This is so soft, and I mean, I'm just eating them out there. I harvested probably 2 gallons of the blackberries, a few blueberries, and these wineberries, and they're just so prolific.
When do
Any
they ripen?
I just finished, so June into July for zone 7. Depending on where you are in your zone, you may have them coming in now. Like if zone 6 might have them coming in now, but zone 8 as well is there probably were May in zone 8, but here in zone 7 they started. Um, and the funny thing is, if you've got quite a few of them like I do, I've got probably, I don't know, 50, 60 brambles, each cane goes straight into the ground. So there's probably 50, 60 in a row, 24-foot row. So as you look at that, you'll see that they have a little husk. That husk pulls away, and that's when the fruit gets that ripe. It looks like a big ruby just sitting there on the edge, and you might have 4 or 5 of this cluster come ripe at one time, maybe 2 or 3, but you've got an extended harvest. They won't all come ripe at the same time, much like the blackberry does. That you'll have an extended harvest with blackberries.
Where did you find those at, the wine berries? Because I've never even heard of those.
They are, it's a rubus fructosa, I think, rubus fructosa. I'm going to put the name down. They grow very prolific. You'll see these and think maybe it's a raspberry, but you see those little prickles right here. Can you see where my mouse is? The whole stem looks like that. Not just a thorn. It's prickle, all the way up and down, all the way up and down the stem, the cane.
Oh, wait a minute. I see what you're talking about. I thought you
Yeah.
were pointing to the end of where the casing of it to protect the fruit. So you're
See,
pointing to the actual
yeah, see right there
the,
where
the
the
prickers.
hairs are. Those are little pricklers. They're a little bit soft, but if you lay your fingers on them, they will certainly leave a thorn in your finger. But that little hair like structure is all the way up and down the stem. So where blackberries will have bonk, 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 bonk,
Yeah.
these are just all the way down. So that, and the stem will be red. Kind of see where this husk has turned red right there, right about there. The husk around it. The stem is about that color as well. And then the leaves are beautiful leaves. This is in the raspberry family. So raspberry is very good for women. Well, I would add black raspberry and wild raspberries on this list as well. Raspberry is very good for women for not menopause, but monthly issues. Pull the leaves, use them as a tea. And not only that, it's highly nutritious as well. So, I do my cane fruits in rows. I have my blackberries far away from the wine berries, simply because there has been some issue with crossing. They don't like each other. So you usually don't find them growing together. So on one side of where my fruit is, I have blackberries, and then a couple hundred, maybe 300 feet away, I have 2 rows of the wine berries, and I'm going to put I love these so much, I'm going to put another row. I've got some ill-performing blueberries. They hardly have put out a berry at all. And instead of taking them up, I'm just going to plant more wine berries in there and leave those blueberries just, they'll eventually do something, either die or maybe they'll get better. But maybe if I water them more, because I do water my wine berries, but they're just so good. I'm adding another row. So,
does the wildlife eat them, or do they leave them alone?
They tend to not. My dog even will eat my blueberries. She'll just eat them right off the bush. I've caught her multiple times out there eating berries off my blueberry bushes. But I don't notice them eating these. I guess maybe it's because of the prickles. The prickles are soft, but they would feel funny on your nose, I think.
Yeah, they probably are a deterrent.
Yeah.
And side note on blueberries, I learned that blueberries are the biggest cash crop for Georgia, which, I know you're not in Georgia, but for Georgia, they're the biggest cash crop. So if you're thinking of doing like a U-pick or something and planting some sort of fruit, tree or bush, the blueberries are really good, prolific.
All of these would be good for cash crops, and they don't really take that much water. Once they start setting fruit is when I start watering. Even my elderberries, I didn't put elderberries on this list, but elderberries is a huge boom right now. Everybody wants elderberries, and all of these berries can be blended together with elderberry. Now, elderberry does take more water. You'll always find it on drainage ditches, like at the edges of fields, things like that. That's where they want to grow. They don't want their feet wet. So here's a little tip on the environment. They don't want their feet wet. They just want to have water nearby. So you won't find them in the bottom of a drainage ditch. They'll be up here. Or up on the top. They want that water to be available to the roots, but they don't like standing in water. As a matter of fact, if you could take a cross section of that drainage ditch, if the water stands in that ditch, the elderberries don't last very long in there. So none of these like their feet to be drowned or underwater. They want to have water, but they do want it to drain away.
And I see you have mulberry.
Yep, cane fruits. Get your cane fruits in there so that your apples and pears and things like that have time to propagate, or not propagate, but to bear fruit, because it takes about 5 years. Mulberry. This is a red mulberry, not because it's red here. It's just called. There's a red mulberry and a white mulberry. Do not get a paper mulberry. It's invasive from from Asia, but a red mulberry will have these quite tasty black berries, very soft. Again, it's not got a lot of acid in it, but it's got a malic acid, but it's not high acid. If fruit bothers you, your digestion, mulberry is a very good one. And mulberry, actually, the leaves on a mulberry are quite edible. You can saute those up, especially before it bears fruit. Remember what we said about bolting? Once it starts setting flowers and fruit, the leaves lose their meristematic quality. They're still edible even after they bear fruit, but I would certainly boil them or steam them at that point. But you can put them in a salad, chop them up and put them in a salad in the early spring when you want that first flush of greens. Mulberry leaf is a good one. Also, hawthorn, you can do the same thing. This is hawthorn over here. And if you look at that little hawthorn, what does it remind you of? Maybe an apple? That's because it's because it's in the same family as apple, which is in the rose family. If you know what a rose hip looks like, that looks just like a rose hip. It looks just like an apple. All of those are in the same family, Rosaceae. So a mulberry, apple tree, crab apple tree, and roses are all cousins. So just like you can eat rose petals, you can eat the mulberry leaves and flowers. I'm not particularly fond of the flowers. They have an odd and funky taste to me, but friends love them. So I just particularly don't like the flowers. I do like the leaves. As a matter of fact, this was in England, this is called bread and cheese tree, meaning bread and cheese, the staples of the meal. You can use this as a staple in your meal. So I would saute them, maybe with some fat, or steam them, or even boil them in a soup. They're quite delicious. And then, of course, the fruit, really good for cardiac support, high in vitamin C, good for the brain, good for circulation, varicose veins, all of those things, high in anthocyanins and flavonoids, several different constituents in hawthorn specifically for the heart. I even use this in a brief formula with mimosa tree. If you're familiar with the mimosa tree, it's very good for that tight.
Helps open up a broken heart.
helps open up the broken heart when you're just grief stricken and it feels like you're drawing inward. It just helps open up and makes you be able to take a breath. So hawthorn is one of my favorites. Mulberry is actually a favorite too. Well, actually, all of these are medicinal as well as edible. So
Can I mention something I learned at the Homestead Festival about the
sure,
mulberry? One of the regenerative talks that I went to, regenerative farming, they were talking about how they plant, since mulberry is also an anti-parasitic, if it's the same variety you're talking
it
about,
is.
they dehydrate, like they just cut off limbs when the leaves are still green. They'll cut off limbs of the mulberry tree and hang them up in the barn so that in the wintertime, their animals will have something healthy to eat. And they'll just
Absolutely.
eat the dried branches, like the leaves. But they also plant hedges, like very close together, hedges of the mulberry trees, and they let them rotationally graze on the mulberry, which is,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah, it's called a tree hay or tree feed, tree
uh-huh.
grass, several different names for it. And yeah, they let because it will, if you cut it down, it coppices like crazy. So you always have mulberries coming up, even when you cut the main tree down. And that's wonderful, like you say, wonderful for grazing. Humans can eat it as well. So here we've gotten medicinal uses, edible leaves, edible or for tea, and a high nutrition content in these cane and tree fruits. All right, last but not least, or number one, as I should say, is wild greens. Now, wild greens start coming up in my area in February. Daisy, for example, if you know what an oxeye daisy looks like, the greens come up very early. It's in the mum family, the Asteraceae family, which is now called compositae. So if you have an Asteraceae family member, if you know what your daisies look like, oxeye daisies, go look at those leaves. They're very oddly shaped. And when they first pop up in February, you can pull those daisy greens, saute them up with your other greens that are coming up in your garden. So I leave big swatches of daisies. I don't have a picture of daisy on here. I just happen to think about it. But I leave swatches of daisies in my garden, not only for the edible qualities, but for the pollinators. So what we have here is on the left is lamb's quarter. Lamb's quarter is a hoary plant, Hoary, and what that means is it's an old English word that means white coating. So if you know what a dusty miller plant looks like, it looks like it's been dusted with white powder. That's a hoary plant. Hoary mountain mint is another plant that looks like it's been dusted. Well, this lamb's quarter actually has a mineral coating on it that makes it look like it's been dusted white. This plant is high in oxalic acid. So if you're prone to kidney stones, just be aware that you'll need to eat it very moderately. You don't want to just have 3 meals a day of it if you're prone to kidney stones, because oxalic acid is a building block for kidney stones or gallbladder stones as well, but most people have kidney stones.
Especially in the South,
Yeah, yeah. This is a
unfortunately.
highly nutritious plant. I love it. I would put. I had a plant just to pop up right outside my door, not 2 steps out. I would have to walk around it, but I let it grow because I was eating on that plant every day. I would put diced up bacon in a pan and turn it on about medium low, and I would take a bowl and go out there and pick a bowl full of these. I mean, this plant came up, it was huge, like 10 stalks, just one little area. It didn't come back. I don't know what it did, but it was so convenient that I could go out there every morning and pull those leaves off. And because you can see some of them sometimes they'll get 3 inches long, maybe even bigger than that. And I would pull me a bowl of those greens, and then by the time my bacon was getting crispy, I would be back, had rinsed my leaves, and I would toss them in the pan with eggs, and I would scramble it all together. And I love it. I love it. So I was really disappointed that particular one didn't come back this year right outside my back door. But you can use this in quiches. I like creamed lamb's quarter and creamed stinging nettle. This is probably the number one nutritious plant, the stinging nettle. Wonderful cash crop too. If you are willing to don your long rose gloves and you can tolerate a few stings, this is a really good cash crop for farmers markets, things like that. You don't want it when it's like this picture, but I wanted you to see the whole plant. This is the flowers and stems. Flowers flowers and seeds getting ready to pop out. But if you get it before the flowers appear, you'll have 3 to 4 weeks of cash crop. If you're chopping off those tops, you'll be able to keep this as a come and cut again. You don't have to pull just the leaves. You can take the whole top, strip it off, and you got your gloves on, strip it off, wash your greens, pack it like you normally would to go to the farmer's market, and you'll get about $10 a pound on these.
Wow.
So, they're very easy to grow. But now you promote that too. If you have a market garden and you're going to farmer's market, put your signage up. People don't know what they are. The same with lamb's quarter. You could do these two as a mix of wild greens, and you're gonna get top dollar for those greens in the green family, as opposed to say mustards or turnips. But you've got them washed and cleaned and ready to go. This one especially, stinging nettle, likes moisture. So my friend Linda has the best bed of stinging nettle that I've ever seen, and she has drainage coming from her barn. She just has it directed right into that bed, and it's probably a 4 by 20 bed, and then she also has an outdoor sink that runs directly into that bed, and it disperses. And she has got more stinging nettle than it just amazes me how thick that bed gets. If you were to look straight down into it, those leaves are so big and so full, you can't see between them as you look down into the bed. And hers will get 4 feet long. It'll go 4 feet tall very easily. And I would say it might even be taller than that. But we cut it down and it comes right back. Cut it down, it comes right back. And then late in the summer, about now, we start letting it seed because the seeds are highly nutritious. They're very good for men's health, testicular health, men's reproductive health. But you only want to take about a half a teaspoon a day. You don't want to load up on those seeds. So it's a really small amount of the seed. And then the root is good for bladder issues, bladder and kidney. So even though it has oxalic acid in it, because it's a green, it's very good. The roots are very good for the bladder and the kidneys. Men's health in general. This is a men's plant, whereas, like I said, evening primrose is a women's plant. Doesn't mean the other sex can't have it.
And for anyone that's not used to using the stinging nettle, my friend is a Seventh-day Adventist, and she says that when they use it in salads, they take a mallet or a wooden dowel type instrument, and they'll mash it in a bowl so it'll push down all the spikes in it, and then you could just eat it fresh in a salad.
That's true.
Or she'll put it in smoothies and stuff.
Yeah, it's wonderful in smoothies. I found that because it does have some oxalic acid, I have a throat injury. If you notice, I'm very hoarse, and I have to clear my throat a lot. The oxalic acid causes issues for me, so I can't eat it raw, but I'll steam it. No problem. I'll steam the lamb's quarter, no problem, or saute it. I don't have any problem with it that way. So I had a throat injury a few years ago, and I don't know if I'm ever going to recover. But anyway, I have to watch the oxalic acid, not for kidney stones, but because of my throat. And two, if you get stung with stinging nettle, take a leaf and fold it back on itself and rub where you got stung, and it will help take away that sting. So it's its own antidote.
How interesting. Does it matter which side of the leaf that you use?
you can if you take and pull it and wrap it on itself. Do you want to use the top side? Look at it,
Okay.
because you'll be able to see the little hairs on it. And they're
Okay.
like a hypodermic. When you break the tip off, that's where the sting comes from. It's full of what is it that's in ants? It starts with an S. Fumicat. Anyway, it's
Fulvic,
saying
not
fulvic
fulvic.
acid. Fulvic acid, yes. I think, and now what it is that's in an ant that causes the sting, same chemical. So that
Huh.
sting does hurt some people. I can tolerate it, but it will also, it's called urtication. This is Urtica dioica. It's called urtication. If you have arthritis, you can take a plant and hit it so that it will sting. It'll bring blood to that area. The sting itself will actually help take inflammation out of that joint. So
Oh,
it's called
wow.
urtication, and that used to be a therapy for swelling or for dropsy. They called it dropsy years ago. All of this edema, things like that, it will help edema. It'll help inflammation in joints when you do the urtication. Now, you have to be able to tolerate it, but you
Yeah.
find yourself getting used to it. I can stick my hand down in the patch and pull leaves. And Linda will say, I don't see how you do that. That stuff just irritates me to death. But if you could see what mosquito bites do to me, it's horrible. So this sting is not nearly as bad for me as mosquito bites. So it's just a little interesting tidbit on how people tolerate things. This one over in the top corner, this is wild garlic. Wild garlic ramps, things like that, will have a wide leaf. Now, if you have a wild onion as well, we'll include those together. Wild onions don't get as pretty tops as wild garlic, but they both will create bulbils. The bulbils themselves, the little seeds in the flower, are just as tasty, but there are toxic lookalikes for this particular type of garlic, these ramps or ramsons. I believe this picture looks more like ramsons than ramps. Ramsons is a European variety of ramp, and ramp is a North American native. Very pungent. The aroma on these are stout, but again, you've got a medicinal benefit. Eating these raw or even cooking them and eating them daily helps with not only your respiratory, but it helps brain function. It helps kidneys. It's very good for the liver. So this is a highly nutritious plant, and all of those constituents that are in it are very helpful, not just nutrition wise, but with other issues as well. You could put a few ramp leaves in with onions and make a poultice to draw out chest congestion. If anybody has ever seen the movie Where the Lilies Bloom, it's an old movie, probably from the early 70s. This young family of children were orphaned, but they didn't want to tell anybody because they knew they would have to go to the county home. This is a North Carolina story too. Well, the neighbor who actually owned the house, who they rented from, his name was Kaiser Pease, and they came up on him. He was sick in the bed when they came to the house for whatever reason, and he was almost delirious with fever and congestion. Well, these kids got him in the bathtub, and they took every onion they could get and just loaded him down with onions in the bathtub. He was fighting them because he was delirious, but it knocked it out overnight. And that's not a stretch. That's not just a movie. That can really happen. So onions and ramps and wild garlic are very beneficial for respiratory.
Wow.
So it's and it's tasty. Man, I can't get enough ramps. I love them to death. Now this plant here is yellow dock. Any of you farmers who have dock out in your field, you're going to call me crazy. But this plant is highly nutritious from the root to the tip. The seeds, you can just you don't even have to winnow them. You just pull all those brown seeds. Now these are not ripe; these are still immature. But once they get ripe, they turn rusty brown, and you can just take those seeds and pull them off. You don't have to winnow them. I'll put them in a pillowcase turned inside out. My favorite harvesting bag. And then put them in your bag. And then when you get home, you don't have to winnow them. You can grind it up, use it for flour, along with those other seeds that we were talking about, and the nut meat. And then the leaves before, this is a biennial plant, not necessarily perennial. All these others are perennial. But this one here, the yellow dock, is a biennial plant, meaning the first year it's going to make a rosette, and the second year it'll make that stem, and then it dies. But in the first year, these leaves are bitter. But how better to start your digestion than with something bitter in your mouth? So bitter greens, even the Bible says, and the children of Israel ate bitter herbs before their journey for their digestion. So bitter greens, we're lacking that bitter taste now because our diet is so sweet, and so many people are having such issues with digestion. If you see somebody who has poor skin, it's connected back to their digestion. If they're having a lot of inflammation or edema, it can be connected back to the digestion because our liver is not processing things enough. And people that have their gallbladder taken out, most of the time the doctor or the nutritionist doesn't tell them to add Swedish bitters or add some type of bitter to their diet to start that digestion, which is the purpose of the gallbladder. The bile that comes out of the gallbladder is to start the digestion. Well, if you're missing that gallbladder, you can accommodate that by adding bitters in your mouth, starting the saliva. As a matter of fact, thinking about bitters, it's making my mouth water because of that. That's the reaction that you're supposed to have. That's starting your digestion. It starts in the mouth. So yellow dock is a really good one for digestion. To not only it's nutritious, but it works great for the liver. The roots can be pounded or boiled and ground up in the first year. Ground them up along with burdock. This is yellow dock. Put them with burdock, and you can even make a meat substitute with those, or add to meat like a wild game or something that's been ground meat. So, but anyway, those are the 5 categories of wild foods that I would suggest getting into on your homestead. Some things that I would not suggest to get on your homestead, but find in safe, clean places. If you're going to harvest, don't harvest right on a road. Get about 50 feet off of a road. But some of the things that I would look for is, and I don't have pictures of these, Japanese knotweed, highly invasive. Autumn olive, which is ripening now. It's an Elaeagnus umbellata. Fabulous berry, little red berry, but it's astringent, so you have to let it get fully ripe. In my area, it's not quite ripe yet. It comes up, late August. Another one for a seasoning would be sumac. Makes a wonderful seasoning, a wonderful tea, a wonderful drink. So those are 3 that I would look for. Not to propagate. Do not propagate those, but find them in your area and know where you can harvest them safely. And there is a ton of food out there in places if you find it. It's just a matter of learning one plant at a time. So don't let this overwhelm you. If you have questions, I'm available. You're welcome to email me, and I will be glad to help you. And I'm also on Facebook, several different places that you can find me.
Yes, find Suzanne on Facebook and Instagram. You can also visit her website, simplehomesteadliving.com. Check out her Granny Mentor program, which they meet on a weekly basis. I hear that is a wonderful opportunity if you're wanting to learn more about different herbs for medicinal and for edible purposes. And yeah, I think that's a really. Oh, let me talk about what upcoming what upcoming events you have. Suzanne has 2 books as well, her Wild Herb Gardening book, and then the Wild Things from Beyond the Garden Gate, and those will both be linked in the show notes. Check those out. And also, we'll link the different reference books that she mentioned in the show notes. And she's having 3 different speaking engagements: Harvest of Blessings, which is in Henryville, Indiana, September 21st, 22nd of this year, 2024. And then also the Deep South Conference in Mentone, Alabama, is November 1st to the 3rd this fall. And then the Georgia Bushcrafters, which is October 8th to the 10th. So she will be speaking at all of those different events. So thank you so much, Suzanne. It's always a pleasure. You're just a wealth of knowledge, such a joy to talk with. I really enjoy all the information and the wisdom that you have to share. And well, this is the last part of our series with you included in the Herbal Medicine Series. So I just appreciate everything that you've contributed, and we look forward to maybe having you back in the future.
Thank you so much. I would love to be back.
All right. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for listening. Join our Facebook group and follow us on Instagram for the latest updates. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website for upcoming events. For sponsorship opportunities, reach out to us through our website. See you next time.